Welcome, everybody. For those of you who have been with us so far, thank you for bearing with us. We hope that you found the first conversation engaging, and we look forward to having you for a second session. For those of you who are just joining, you're most welcome. Welcome to the NIPR Diaspora Dialogue as part of the NIPR Citizen Summit on Integration, Peace and Security. We will now be moving on to session 2 of the Diaspora Dialogue, the complexity of Nigerian identity. Like most African countries that have a complex history since their independence, Nigeria's identity it's a complex and sensitive issue, but it is one that we need to tackle, especially if we want to come together stronger under one nation and push Nigeria to become the giant that it should be and that it absolutely can be. For this session, we will be exploring the complexity of Nigerian identity. We have a very rich panel of honorable speakers joining us who will be speaking the pains and challenges of a Nigerian citizen in the diaspora, recognizing the positive role and the importance of multiculturalism in Nigeria, and more topics. So without further ado, I will move on to our first speaker of the day. This is Mr. Frisky Lar, who is a prolific author joining us today. His essays explore contemporary political issues in Nigeria daily, virtually and online, and his books cover contemporary African political issues. His latest book, titled Leadership and Crime, Siamese Twins in Africa, is currently undergoing a social media campaign process for more exposure. Frisky Lar is at the head of a translation and interpreting company in Germany, where he caters for the language needs of state institutions as well as private individuals. He will be speaking today on addressing the pains and challenges of a Nigerian citizens in the diaspora. Mr. Lar, you have the floor. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're muted, sir. Yes, no worries.
Okay. Is it all right now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much, man. Greetings to everybody here today. Yeah, since it will be difficult to differentiate between pains and challenges, so I'll try to approach the issue from two periodic perspectives. You know, the early post-independence decades in Nigeria actually saw a situation where movement to the diaspora was more a thing for the privileged class, basically involving people, you know, getting involved in studies, higher callings, with support and backing from rich parents and family. And the basic problems they had in those periods has transformed into a different level compared to what we have today. Basically, those days, you know, diasporans will have problems of not accessing information from home as early as it should be. I remember those days when there were scrambles for newspapers that dated back 3 months, you know, to get abreast with things that are happening politically, socially in the country. And then they had problems with, African meals, no Afro shops, you know, no traditional food that you could eat in the country, you know, just kind of adapted to the situation you find yourself in. And people then got used to living like the host nations they were in. And then there was also the issue that parents, because they were richer and were able to afford the presence of their siblings, of their family members in other countries, had the challenges of sending money home, sending money abroad for the upkeep of these people. But today, all of these things are reversed. The quality of people abroad is no longer, the type you find in the corridors of universities. It's not the type, that are confined. Of course, there are those who are in the diplomatic corridors and doing different levels of work, notwithstanding the degrees of crime that has also infiltrated that area. The movement today has created a different dynamic in terms of problems and in terms of challenges, in terms of pains. So rather than family in those old days sending money to people abroad, the dominant trend today is people working abroad to send money home to parents. Now, the money you send home from the diaspora contributes a lot in building the economy of the country. And then you face a problem that you contribute quite a lot to the GDP, and you have no say in the political process of in the country. Now, when there was a situation once, I remember, a deputy Senate president presiding over a session in Nigerian Senate and was presented with a motion filed by Nigerians in the diaspora from the United States. And he proudly and, I'll say, putatively, intelligently stated that those who were not living in Nigeria as Nigerians had no right to present a motion for legislative debate. So this was something that sent an uproar. It really sent a chill down the spine of very many reasoning individuals in the country. Many intellectuals questioned him and questioned his educational background and where he got his information from. So that's one of the basic problems that we say constitutes pain and challenges. And then you also have very many of our people these days, compared to the early post-independence decades, who are today stranded in transit. Not necessarily, because those days, definitely when you are traveled out of the country, you were going to go through an educational process. And at the end of the day, your basic challenge was how quickly you could finish your studies, get back home and contribute to nation building and improve your standard of living. But today, people move out of the country to see how they can not only improve their own standard of living, but the standard of living of those they left behind. Father and mother probably sold one plot, one house or two houses or whatever to finance the movement abroad. And then the challenges they face leaves them almost with no other alternative than to commit crime. So, and then of course you come to a country, basically you don't speak the language. If you're not in England, if you're not in America, where you probably improve on your English, you'll end up in a country like Poland, like Germany, Denmark, or whatever, where you'll have to learn a language first to be able to adapt to the situation. So when these things are missing, employability becomes a problem. And when you're not employable, you're left basically with one chance of committing crime. So, and crime, spirals into something else, with an image, overall image for the people that actually overshadows the few good ones that would have been able to shine the light of the country. And then you have this most destructive character that you neither belong here nor there. You're in a society where actually, okay, you are a citizen, you are a foreigner, even if you, over time, aspire to get the passport of the host country, where you will be called a citizen. But everybody knows you are not a citizen. And then you move back to your country, the first reaction you find is, what do you know? I remember when I wrote my first book, Nigeria's Journalistic Militantism, where I observed the role of the media in the Obasanjo presidency, because that was the very first presidency we had in the new dispensation. The media that was so interest-riddled, dominated by vested interest and economic groups and all that, played a very, very unholy and unwholesome role that I analyzed in this book. So the problem was, while carrying out my research for this book, I stumbled into a lot of information that very many people in Nigeria had no clue about. So when this book was detailed and it got home, very many journalists read it. I know some of them called me and said, look, how did you get all these facts? We're here, we didn't know. So, well, they're verifiable. And of course, they knew they were all facts. But the point is, when you get home, they say, you don't live here, you can't know it. And then you find the deterioration of the economy, security, and then, aggravated by incompetent political leadership that you just actually don't know. So that the greatest challenge now, so the challenge of the Nigerians in the early post-independence decades, as I said, was completing your courses quickly, moving back home and see what you can contribute. But today, the greatest challenge is, can we ever go back home again? A friend of mine, with whom I did my first degree in Ankara, Turkey, went back home to Nigeria to settle down for good. In the course of time, he lost his parents. Then the few brothers and sisters he had left, he got all of them together, migrated to Canada, and started a business in Canada, and vows proudly today, I'm not going back to that country because there is no hope for that country. So the greatest challenge we have today as diasporans is, what country do we have to go back to? Is there anything for us in that country in the near future? Even on the long run, what is the hope? So I don't know if I'm running out of time, but I'll basically say, in a nutshell, these are the pains and challenges of a diaspora. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. That was, I think it's a good way to start this conversation. We would like to go on to our next speaker, who will be addressing equally the challenges of being a Nigerian citizen in the diaspora, before I'll come back to you in the end for our Q&A. So now I will be moving on to our next speaker, Alhaji Misbah Akoni, who will be speaking to us on the same topic. Alhaji Akoni is an academic senior lecturer in linguistics at the Bahia State University of Salvador in Brazil. He's also the president of the Nigerian community and former director of the Nigerian Cultural Center in Bahia, in Brazil. He's also the president of the Great Ife Alumni Association Brazil chapter. Alhaji Akoni, thank you so much for joining us today. You now have the floor.
Okay, good day. I want to thank you for the invitation. Well, the topic is addressing the pains and challenges of the Nigerian citizen in diaspora. I've categorized the movement in 3 ways. The first was the pre-independence movement by the so-called our political leaders. Examples of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Tafawa Balewa, Anthony Enao, who all studied overseas and came back and start to struggle for the emancipation of Nigeria and our independence. And they did that very well, that in a short while, without much problem, they got our independence for us. Although that didn't last long, that in 1966, the army struck and ended the civilian administration of that period. So that is the first set of people who moved out of Nigeria in search of greener pastures, in search of educational qualification, and which they came back and used the knowledge they have acquired in those countries in diaspora to ask for our independence, and they got it. Now, after that period, the next was people who were sent out by their parents, as the former speaker said, the rich one who sent their wards to go and study overseas, get qualified, and come back to contribute positively to the economic development of Nigeria. That will last till 80s and 90s. Now, after that period, one could notice that the movement is mostly on the economic reasons, for economic reasons. As things was getting worse, were getting worse in Nigeria, people started to think of moving out. In the beginning, the currency, the naira, was very strong. That was even stronger than the dollar. But as things were getting worse and naira losing the value, people started thinking of moving out. Professionals, medical doctors, nurses, engineers, lecturers, they started to move out. I could remember in the 80s, some of our lecturers, even at Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, who went for sabbatical, they never came back. So they simply stayed overseas and contributed to the economic development of that country in different universities, and started to sending money home to them, to their families. So the economic reason spoke wider, louder than reason for just going to obtain educational qualification and come back. All those set of people will go and they won't come back to the country, probably to visit. So the drift started, and Nigeria started to lose some of its best hands to already develop the economy. So the doctors and nurses in the UK today who are Nigeria trained are more than those you have back at home. Talk less of other countries like the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, who hire our qualified people that were trained with the resources of the country for them to assist in developing Nigeria, the medical sector. But what they do is to check out. I could remember this music that was played at the interval where we're talking of Andrew. Andrew, don't check out. Or whatever. This was in the 80s, 90s, when government started to discourage people from moving out. But that didn't last long. It didn't change much, the situation. People continued to move out. Actually, the pains are mostly coming from home. It's because of the lack of good governance, lack of infrastructures, lack of facilities. People who have tasted good governance outside with stable electricity, uninterrupted water, communication, and security, they wouldn't want to come back into a society where nothing is guaranteed, where nothing is working. So the main challenges lies with the political leaders of Nigeria. And as things are getting worsening every day, so something has to be done. As we are preparing to move into another political era, I just hope, like every other Nigeria living outside, that we will get our acts together and we will stop with all these trial and error administration, hand over the country to competent hands who turn our fortune into better days ahead. I will talk about the pains again, that most people who went out later didn't do that on their own volition. They were forced to move out because the country cannot guarantee them the good life and the better economy that can support their training, especially like the doctors, even athletes who don't have facilities to be able to practice their different sporting activities and move out. We know so many who have represented other countries in competition, in football and in any other game. So the challenges they face outside are also as a result of things happening at home. Like the moment in some points of entry or in some countries, the moment they look at your passport, see that it's a Nigerian passport, the discrimination has started. They ask you to move aside. I was going home the other time in South Africa. In South Africa, which is an Africa country, we shouldn't be giving us problem. Other citizens were going when they see that they are Nigerians. Oh, they take your passport and ask you to stay by the side. So which means there is no more respect for our green passport. And this wasn't the case in the past when our currency was very strong and we were doing very well. But things started to change gradually. And I just hope in the very near future that things will get better for the country and our respect will be back to where it should be. So you have the problem of the passport, and some people who complain about the attitudes of our missions overseas too.
Alaji Akoni, maybe just a few more seconds to wrap up your comments, and if you can bring forward recommendations, like things that you would like to see happen to address the challenges of being a Nigerian citizen in the diaspora, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, so I'm talking about the difficulties being faced by our nationals outside, like to renew their passports. Sometimes they say they go to the embassies and they won't get their passport renewed, or delays. Some have to bribe. All these challenges must be looked at. Like in Brazil now, the consulate in Sao Paulo has been closed down for more than 2 years. So everyone who has to renew passport or obtain any document has to go to Brasilia, which is far and it involves other payments. So, okay, probably the next will be answered during the question and answer.
I can encourage you and Mr. Friskilar to think of concrete recommendations that you'd like to put forward specifically on the topic that you've discussed today. That would be fantastic. But without further ado, I'll move on to our next speaker today, who is Jonah Obina Enefe, who is joining us today from Belgium. Mr. Enefe is a graduate of law, and he's the CEO of Enefe Consulting BVBA in Belgium, a company that is specialized in business strategy, sales, and HR consulting for companies and government over the past decade. He has traveled widely all over Nigeria, and he'll be speaking to us today on recognizing the positive role and the importance of multiculturalism in Nigeria. Mr. Enefe, you're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to your contribution. You now have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I want to specifically thank Honorable Collins and Madame Winifred Gallard for their appreciation of my opinions on the matter, and to Crystal Dochi for the wonderful introduction. To the previous distinguished panelists, I want to emphasize my appreciation as well for the well-founded arguments and talking points. As a new panelist on the NIPR dialogue, I want to extend my gratitude and appreciation to every single person seeking to make initiative on this topic, as it will ultimately benefit us and Nigeria to drive us for betterment into the near future. You travel to search and you come back home to find yourself, as renowned author Chimamanda Adichie quote goes. Multiculturalism, or the impact Nigerians with a more diverse background can make, is not to be underestimated. I speak from personal experience when I say that a more engaging approach towards this demographic could captivate a whole generation and impact the level of engagement and the social construct of the country as a whole. Being born and raised in Europe, I found from an early age the need to discover my roots, which led me to an in-depth search and acquaintance with everything relating to Nigeria until I was able to visit Nigeria for the first time at the age of 16. Considering myself to be quite industrious, upon arriving, all I could see was a beautiful country, abundant in potential, both in its people and future prospects of the country in its own right. It was there, after a short but powerful acquaintance with the late Dora Akunyili, a few years before she championed her book in the fight against counterfeit medicine. It was then that I knew I would relocate to Nigeria and pursue my own goals of contributing, building, supporting the same societal growth I am sure we all would like to witness.
Mr. Enefe, I'm sorry to interrupt you, just 1 second. We're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Is it possible that you perhaps lift your microphone just so we can hear you a little bit better?
Can you hear me better now?
It's still a bit challenging, but if we can't make it better, then we'll just have to proceed this way. Can you try one more time?
Okay. Okay. On my other subsequent trips to Nigeria, I was able to visit the plentiful states and regions we have and discover further the entrepreneurial, industrious-driven people we call our countrymen. In order to gain that success, I believe we have to be able to examine the demands and the needs of the many different cultural groups and take into account the assets we have in the diaspora. I strongly believe that Nigeria as a nation that has many ethnic groups with different cultures separated by boundaries and regions, with often historical family ties going back into Europe, South America, North America, and Asia, is qualified to be named a multicultural state. One of the questions is that how can we establish the multiculturalist positive goal along with Nigerian politics? The first step we as Nigerians need to take is to face the question whether the multicultural concept is something we are willing to embrace. Besides the natural endowment demographic-wise, since the term can cause paradoxical knee-jerk reactions, because instead of unity, multiculturalism is in essence diversifying a country by definition. Many countries around the world already have discovered and developed ways to engage their expatriates and their current and even future passport holders with the ultimate sign of enfranchisement, being diaspora voting rights, which is practiced by 115 countries at this very moment. It's sometimes being in accordance to certain conditions. For example, in Australia, you need to articulate the intent to return to Australia within 6 years. Other countries have a more loose approach to engage their diaspora populace. Diaspora voting is important because it enhances the legitimacy of the chosen government and its electoral process, and also its democratic image. The fact that all citizens are afforded the right to vote, regardless of where they reside, brings such citizens into the national agenda. In an article The Economist magazine published a few years back, The Economist dubbed Nigerians living in the diaspora Nigeria's secret weapon, which I believe to be true. To an even greater extent as The Economist, taking into consideration second and third generation Nigerians residing in the diaspora, often with a more diverse ancestry just like myself, and like I witness in Nigerian families around me. In view of the enormous contributions of Nigerians living abroad to the socio-economic development of the country, I think it is time to amend the Constitution to recognize and protect their rights to participate in local and federal elections conducted in the country. Since Nigerians living abroad are entitled to be voted for if they meet the requirements of the law, the demand to participate should be considered reasonable, with up to 30 countries in Africa already practicing this policy. Some countries have found it necessary to expand the participation of their citizens living abroad in their national elections in other ways. In addition to granting their citizens living overseas the right to vote, there are other countries that have people representing them in the National Assembly, for example. Every citizen of Nigeria who has attained the age of 18 years residing in Nigeria at the time of registration of voters for purposes of the election to a legislative house shall be entitled to register as a voter for that election. This suggests that this part of the Constitution has to be amended first to allow voter registration in Nigerian embassies and consulates. Additionally, I feel Nigeria has the potential and opportunity to achieve a very closely knit, cohesive social structure if we are willing to step out of comfort zones and make the confrontation on all aspects, including intercultural conferences, summits, and workshops, enhanced historical and intercultural education, and open exchanges of the different and parallel visions we share for our country, its people, and its future perspective. However, I do feel that with the potential population growth we face as a country, the time we have is limited. The trend of a feeling of disconnect among demographics and ethnic groups, and in turn with the government, is on a worldwide rise, and I think it is important to act accordingly. So to not steal too much of your time, I am eager to champion these initiatives along with every Nigerian with a heart and will to further develop our engagement and relations. I am extremely grateful, however, to have noticed exactly that in every interaction we have, and I, for one, am not worried about what the future will hold, given the general level of determination we carry to better ourselves as a civilized society. I want to thank all the panelists, attendees, as well as the organization and institute brought to life to bring these issues and opportunities to the forefront.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Mr. Anefa. That was rich. For those of you who haven't had the chance to hear what he said, I just want to summarize a few points that he brought up, which are excellent, and I strongly echo, including the recommendations that he has made. Those include concerns about how we need to embrace multiculturalism, which is not unity, but rather brings more diversity, which is the richness of Nigeria. And he also speaks of how voting is a right and should be enshrined as a right for the diaspora, which will contribute to increasing the democratic image of Nigeria and contribute to softening the issues that we've spoken about. And I've seen a comment in the chat on the image that the green passport in Nigeria has abroad. He also spoke about the need to amend the constitution to allow the diaspora to be able to participate in local and federal elections, since it is a requirement for Nigerians at home. This demand should be reasonable, and I'm quoting in this instance. He also suggested that as other countries have allowed, Nigerians in the diaspora should also potentially be allowed to become representatives. So, for example, I can quote France, which is having actually legislative elections today, but there are representatives, for example, for the region of Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. North America has a representative at the parliament, etc., etc. And he also encouraged as a recommendation that we should allow voter registration for the diaspora in embassies and the consulates. Sorry. Finally, he has mentioned the fact that intercultural conferences, summits, and workshops would be beneficial to making multiculturalism a strength. And he wants to welcome any and every Nigerian with a heart to follow this cause, to help him champion and develop our engagement and relations with the diaspora. Mr. Anefa, sorry, I'm just summarizing because I know some people had a few issues hearing you. Thank you so much for your comments. I will now move on to our next speaker, and then I will entertain a Q&A at the end. As has been said in the chat, please make use of the Q&A function. I see some questions coming in. I want to encourage you to react with what you've heard. What do you feel about voter registration for Nigerians at the diaspora? In the meantime, I'd like to welcome Mentoring Commandant Alistair Shoyode, who will be speaking to us today on diaspora and the NYSC scheme. What options? Mentoring Commandant Shoyode is the founding pioneer of the first Black and ethnic television in Europe, BEN Television. He's also involved in all aspects of television production and a broadcaster. He's a former global leader of the Nigerian Diaspora Organization, and he's keenly focusing on mentoring, leadership, coaching, and skills development. He leads on Africa and Black leadership, entrepreneurial, management, and personal development, especially in the fields of media, political processing, trade, and investment promotion across management and personal development, especially in the fields of media, political processing, trade, and investment promotion across nations. He is an ambassador as well as a member of some strategic organizations and companies in the agricultural sector, where reforms and policies are needed for high quality food production. Mentoring Commandant Shoyode, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And you now have the floor to speak on diaspora and the NYSC scheme. What options? I look forward to hearing your concrete recommendations on how to make this better. Sir, you are muted. Sir, you're muted.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about the opportunity between Nigerian diaspora and the National Youth Service Corps, which is the NYSC. As we all know, or probably have been following, the NYSC was established in Nigeria in 1973, which is a one-year mandatory service for Nigerian graduates. Nevertheless, there's an option of people who are more than 30 years old that have graduated to be exempted from the NYSC scheme in Nigeria. As we know, education is very, very important to our people, especially Nigerians, and thousands of students on a yearly basis to get the opportunity being sponsored by their parent or by government institution to go to to visit outside Africa, Nigerian countries around the world to study and graduate. And most of the time, when this graduate, either young or old, they end up staying in the host country, not going back to Nigeria, which to us as a nation is a gain that we are not really gaining, but we are losing the capacity of developing the country, because after graduation, due to all the challenges that has been identified in Nigeria, they end up not going back to Nigeria. The question now is, what do we do as a nation? Apart from the diaspora remittances of more than 20 billion on a yearly basis, when you calculate almost 10% of that as well is used to sponsor students from Nigeria to go to universities all around the world to study. Some universities charge between $30,000 to $50,000 per annum. Now, with thousands of Nigerian students all scattered around the world, Nigeria technically and physically in terms of economic value is losing more than $5 billion on a yearly basis, likewise, to sponsor Spain in terms of studies, accommodation, flight of the same student that could have stayed in Nigeria to benefit the nation in national development. Nevertheless, as we have seen, now we are in this process, but the NYC scheme, which is very, very important because it was established after the Nigerian Civil War in the 1970s in order to bring the Nigerian people together and expose our youth and graduate to mingle and mix across the country by rendering that one-year service. Now, nevertheless, it is still there, but for a different reason and different perspective. So from our own point of view, as Nigerians outside the country in the diaspora, it is key, as evidently seen, when a former minister was relieved of her job due to her NYC scheme certificate that was not rendered or that was not accepted at that particular time. And at the end of the day, she ended up leaving her job. Nevertheless, she has been cleared to be found that she did not commit any crime. For the sake of our youth and for the sake of all the students and all the people who are in the diaspora studying and really want to contribute to the national development, something has to be done. And that is the reason why now we're talking about the options. What are the options that can be rendered by Nigerians in the diaspora towards national development, contributing to go back home to serve? The challenges are there, but we still have people who are 100% willing to go back to Nigeria and contribute their own quota. The benefit of this NYC scheme, or the benefit of serving Nigeria within that one-year period, is that for those who want to go into the public sector, who want to work with government institutions, they have the upper hand to know that the NYC has been recognized as a template and something that needs to be used when you want to work for government. So it's a big benefit for those who can. But at the end of the day as well, is for Nigerian agencies or Nigerian government to render the opportunity for the diaspora who are going back home to be able to have the facility and to have the freedom to mix freely without having too much headache in terms of their logistic and welfare when they are in Nigeria. So my recommendation or my thought in this aspect is, surely enough, because it's a constitutional requirement that somebody who's above 30 will not need to go through the NYC scheme. So they automatically have an exemption. It's then therefore for the Nigerian in the diaspora, for them to be encouraged to go back home. Let the government try to create a welfare scheme that will now look after the diaspora who are going back home. Not the same treatment. One is not asking for a special treatment purposely for the diaspora, but at the end of the day to be considered to be well taken care of in terms of their living expenses, because the experience they are gaining here, the skill they have gained while studying abroad is of benefit to Nigeria if given the opportunity to really render it in the best way, in the best practice, under good leadership and good governance. I know, surely enough, a couple of years ago, around 2020, the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, NIPR, met with the NYC in 2020 to establish NIPR NYC decks, whereby the Nigerians in the diaspora who really want to go back home to contribute and serve within that one-year period would be services will be provided to them through the Nigerian Commission, which is headed by Honorable Abike Dabri. The point here now is for us to really examine how far have they gone, how many students, how many youth have they got from the diaspora who have gone back to Nigeria and have worked. What is the story aspect? What is their success rate over the last 2 years. Nevertheless, we end up having the COVID pandemic within this period. So, but we need to still go back and examine and do an investigation, do a research to know the benefit and how many students went back home. And at the end of the day, what happened to them? Did they end up staying in Nigeria, or did they end up coming back to their different host nation? That would be of interest to the diasporan community. That would be an interest in Nigerian development. And at the end of the day, as we now begin to look into the next phase of governance in Nigeria, there is no doubt the diasporan community has got more than just the remittances that is being rendered on a yearly basis to Nigerian development. So I would like us to see the opportunity of not just the mentoring aspect of the core, but the aspect of joining almost every aspect of the Nigerian system, from the political side to the public sector side to the private sector side. Again, we know that every year, July, the Nigerian community outside the country always go back home to participate in the Diaspora Day, which is normally between 18 and 27 of July, which is next month. So again, I will hope that through this type of conversation, we're able to gauge what NIPCOM is doing. We're able to gauge the National Youth Service Corps scheme that has been collaborated with NIPCOM for the benefit of Nigerians who are studying outside the country. Because at the end of the day as well, this will help and encourage and motivate Nigerians, knowing fully well that when they finish their studies, there are opportunities there for them when they go back home to participate and work with the public sector and work with the government. But bureaucracy that is established in the Nigerian system, most of the time deny people who really have positive aspiration, positive skill to develop. And I think this is something that NIPR should take on with NIPCOM to examine, evaluate, and see how we can continue to encourage our people who are graduate rather than staying abroad and now start working. And one thing that we should take into account as well is some of these European countries now are introducing new laws whereby immigrants or migrants that are studying in their nations with good degrees and good certificate or good skills at the end of the day will have the opportunity of staying in that host country for work. And rather than going back, now you have the opportunity of staying. So Nigeria should not exclude this opportunity of these thousands of graduates that have learned high skill quality work and studies in the diaspora not to go back home, especially with what we're seeing all happening across Europe with the challenges of either the war or not that is taking place. So we should capitalize to take the opportunity of our graduates and youth who want to go back home to provide the opportunity to join in the nation's development and nation capacity building. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commandant Shode. That was excellent, because we keep talking about the brain drain, and you've brought forward some actual recommendation as to how we can tackle it. And I look forward to the Q&A. I can see there are quite a few comments going left and right, so I look forward to the Q&A. But before this, and before I give you the floor for questions, I will move on to our last speaker of this session, Ms. Jumoke Akin-Taylor, who's joining us today. Welcome. Ms. Akin-Taylor is a construction project manager with over 30 years of experience in the construction industry. She is the executive director and the founding member of Rebuild Nigeria Initiative, RNI, a group of concerned Nigerians advocating for the progress and advancement of Nigeria. She served on the board of NIDO Americas as the chairman of mobilization for several years, and she served as the coordinator of the Nigerian Global Diaspora Forum for 2 years. She's a strong advocate for equity and justice, and she serves on a couple of national construction professional boards. She's passionate about Nigeria, as everyone has joined us today, and she's committed to the cause of Nigeria's restoration. Ms. Akin-Taylor will be speaking to us on reclaiming our country, regaining our identity. Ms. Akin-Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to your contributions, and you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank all the speakers that have gone ahead. I think I have a unique topic to speak on, because I wish it was the landmass we were talking about reclaiming, whether it was trying to reclaim something we had lost on the landmass, then there is a scientific way to do that. But what we have lost in Nigeria is very deep. And so it depends on which generation you're speaking to. The silent generation, those born before 1945, and then they have a different perspective of what Nigeria was and what we lost. And then the baby boomers and the Gen X, such as myself, we also have a different perspective of what Nigeria was and what we have lost. You know, I'm from the baby boomer generation, and I know what Nigeria was. So I know what Nigeria have lost and what we need to regain back. The millennials and the centennials have a different Nigerian experience. It's completely different. I don't know that they can relate to the Nigeria most of us are even talking about. I can go on and on about the challenges in Nigeria. Everyone knows that. But I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm probably at the risk of being called, what is it called, a pagan or an atheist. And there is the elephant in the room that we really don't talk about, that is an integral part of Nigeria's challenges. It created a social construct of psychophancy that has really caused us to fall, and that is the religious sector. Before we even start to talk about reclaiming our country, we have to deal with this elephant in the room. Because I grew up in a Nigeria that was disciplined. I grew up in a Nigeria where it had its challenges, but we had law and order. I remember at the age of 11, 12, I would go to the bank myself to go pay my school fees. And there was a line. I would wear my uniform. I got my money and I would pay, no fear of anything. So that is the Nigerian experience. So what happened? What happened where we now started to lose that sense of responsibility, discipline, and the moral integrity that we had as Nigerians? And this is where I say religion created a social construct that we now live in. And that is what has yielded the political landscape that we have today. And we're not talking about that. We're thinking that we change politics, we change leaders, and that's how we're going to reclaim our country. That's how we're going to get back that Nigeria that we're looking for. Nigeria is not a problem because it's doing everything. It has given its citizens everything it's supposed to. Fertile soil, good weather, natural resources, everything Nigeria needs to take care of its citizens, it has. So it is we, the people, that need to change our minds. We need to deconstruct where we are coming from. And as we begin to speak, for us here in the diaspora, and I've been in this diaspora space for probably 15, 20 years fighting for this same Nigeria we've been looking at. I've heard everyone talk about the Diaspora Day, and Sir Collins remember the days of planning the very first Diaspora Day, July 25th. I'm still looking for what we can attribute to all those times that we have spent going to the Diaspora Day as that's part of reclaiming. I'm still looking for those things that we can point to as our achievements for participating in some of these things. So for us to reclaim our country, we need to also hold ourselves accountable. We need to hold those in power accountable. We need to look at what we are doing. At some point, we also have to do an audit. And I'm speaking for us here in the diaspora. We've invested so much in Nigeria. We've invested our time. We've invested our resources. We need to start critically looking at those contributions and the impact it's making. For you economists and scientists, you mentioned your key performance indexes, the KPIs. That's part of what we need to do. We need to start taking a critical look at our contribution in Nigeria. which areas can we improve on? We do have the power, we have the resources, but we haven't synergized it. That's something else that we really need to consider. How do we build that unity? Second point that I want to bring up is we hear about how great Nigerians are doing in their respective adopted countries, or the countries that have not adopted us. We're doing great everywhere you go. A Nigerian is in a top position, is in a position of influence. Yet we haven't used those influences to help develop Nigeria. And I speak as a Christian, and I look at the Nehemiah Project. And even we refer to all these other countries like India and the contributions of the diasporas, Jamaica, all these other countries that have now advanced beyond the critical point they were, had strong contributions from the diaspora community. So the challenge with us is the unity. Here's a forum that has brought us together. How do we begin to build on that unity for the benefit of Nigeria? How do we try to influence our host countries to take us seriously and begin to speak or advocate for changes, for accountability of our leaders in Nigeria? How do we do that? We can't do it if we're not united, if we're not first Nigerians. Because here, I'm in the US. If I go to my congressman and I'm advocating, and I have no issues with Yoruba Nation or IPOB, but if I'm advocating for Yoruba Nation, they're not going to take me seriously. But if I go in as a Nigerian, and if collectively we go in as Nigerians to really speak on the issues happening in Nigeria, I bet you they will take us more seriously. So those are some of the things we need to really look at, influencing our host countries as a collective group of people to put the agenda of the nation forward. Nigeria is in crisis. We can speak English from here till tomorrow. Nigeria is in crisis. You know, we can write white papers and send all kinds of WhatsApp. It is not going to save the day. It is imploding. And we in the diaspora have a lot to do. Voting is one thing. It's great if we can vote. But without that, there is so much we can do from outside. We can put pressure on our host countries to hold state actors accountable. It is very clear. Their monies are not in Nigeria. Their monies are outside. So how do we get these host countries to begin to, and I want to use a very strong word, maybe impose personal sanctions on some of the perpetrators of the evil against Nigeria? How do we do that? And it's by speaking up as a collective unit. When we hold rallies, we come together as Nigerians. We put the national agenda forward. We hold it, it's simultaneous. We hold it in Washington, we hold it in London, we hold it in Belgium, we hold it in Paris. We synergize our efforts so that it becomes a movement from the diaspora. If the fathers of old were able to come together to gain independence for Nigeria, it is something that we can do. So I know my 10 minutes is up, but I'm very passionate and I can speak for the next 20 minutes on this topic. But I'll be back for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Akintaylor. I mean, passionate people is what we need, and also people who, you know, are down to earth and can actually say, we've been talking about this. This is not a new issue, and we need to keep ourselves accountable. And I think I'd like to put a question to you later on what you think these KPIs need to be, how we measure our impact and contributions. But I'll get to that. Maybe, I mean, you can even answer it now, and then I'll get back to Mr. Enefe in a second. So what would the KPIs that you've mentioned, the key performance indicators to measure the diaspora's contribution and impact on national issues in Nigeria? Could you suggest a few in just a few seconds?
And one of the things I would just quickly throw out there is maybe education and health. We've been talking about reforming our educational sectors. How have we succeeded? What schools have we impacted? What is the success rate of those schools? That's one way to measure. But we have to first establish the benchmark from where we started. and Sir Collins will probably speak to this. This probably started about 15 years ago. The healthcare sector, diasporans are going to perform medical missions every year. We need to be able to measure that. How much, who have they served? How many people's lives have been saved? The operations, we need to begin to have a catalog of that. That is very important. I don't know that that's anywhere. So that's a first step to be able to really showcase the impact the diasporans are making. And we have to do that.
Thank you very much. Then maybe I can move on to, there is a question that was put to Mentoring Commandant Shoyode from, I think, Uzoma again, from Luxembourg, that said, the NYSC was established in 1973 at the end of the Civil War, so 49 years ago. Don't you think that the NYSC legislative should be reviewed to include challenges our nation is facing today? By this, the way this is a challenge Zone 3 and the NIPR could tackle together and pressure our lawmakers to catch on the initiative. So what do you think about making the legislation more relevant to the challenges of today?
Well, thank you very much. The reality is actually nothing happens in Nigeria without the members of the National Assembly and the Senate approving. And so when I look at the Nigerian situation today, that we're all crying on social media, we're crying on the newspapers, on the media platform, talking about the issues that is confronting the country. The number one people that really need to solve those problems are the people in the National Assembly, those elected representatives for and on behalf of the 80 million Nigerians who carry their voting card. What we are seeing as of today across the country, especially with the recent election that has just taken place in a state in the country, you see money is talking. So in order for this law to be changed or to be brought into today's reality in Nigeria, I think it's all down to the National Assembly. They are the one that can help change and modify the laws to signify what the Nigerian NYSC should be. But at the end of the day, the reality is actually the NYSC is a good platform for emerging graduates who are just leaving universities. As you know, across the country, the percentage of people who graduate or who finish secondary school going to university, or those who graduated finding job, is much more lower than expected. So this is just like a platform that gives them the opportunity at least to be engaged for a year, no matter how small the welfare is given to them, but it's a good template to start with. Apart from the insecurity that we confront that have created a lot of challenges for families of graduates, allowing their children to go across the country. I think, yes, the National Assembly, the members of the legislators need to do more. And in aspect of really is security and making sure that the law of the country affect those who commit crime, not just against NYSC COP members, but against Nigeria as a nation.
Thank you. And there's just a follow-up question, if you could answer briefly. The 30-year benchmark for NYSC, is it before graduation, within the year of graduation, or after graduation? That's a question from Chief Charles Ugo Eke in the audience.
I believe it's at graduation, which means when you graduate after the age of 30, you are exempted from serving.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have a question for Alaji Akoni. Thank you for bearing with us so far. You've mentioned, people returning once they've studied abroad. As a professor, if you were to speak hypothetically in terms of recommendations that you could make, what conditions would need for yourself or any other imaginary professor, what conditions would you need to be guaranteed for your return to Nigeria, for you to feel like you have the incentive to come back?
Okay, thank you for the question. People in the academic line, they will want to have a society or an environment where they can practice their profession better. They should make available the infrastructure within the academic environment viable. There must be funds for researches and extension, as it is available in universities overseas. In some countries, every year they replace your laptop, your desktop for you. Funds are made available for your research activities. which is compulsory. You see, in Nigeria, all these are not presently available.
Absolutely.
They are on strike. The university has been on strike for quite a long time now, because they are asking for very little money. And you see in the news that an accountant general of the Federation has stolen about 80 billion, while the university needs less than 20 billion. So all these things will be looked into, and the government should make available funds. They should negotiate quickly with the academic staff, of the university, and let the system come back to working perfectly. Our children are locked out of the university because of the strike, and they are losing. Those who must have gone for NYC cannot go. So all this must be looked into. As long as the environment is not make a conducive, it will be difficult for somebody who is well established overseas to come back home and live and work in that kind of environment. I hope.
Thank you.
From the next position, things will be better. That is our hope. We are hopeful for better days.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. I'm going to move to another question to Frisky Lar. We have a super active member of the audience, and I really thank her for all the comments that she's put so far. So the issue of brain drain is more present today than it was 30 years ago, especially as it may concern our doctors, our nurses, and ICT specialists. How can NIPR and the NIPR Diaspora Zone 7 develop a containment policy with regard to crime scenes among the Nigerian diaspora? So speaking on to the comments that you made, the question that you asked, namely, which country are we going to go back to, is very relevant, especially when combined with the COVID-19 pandemic challenges that we now face since the pandemic started. Insecurity in the country, food insecurity, which is now going to be under threat of being increased due to the Ukraine war, and other national security challenges. You're muted, sir. And if I can ask you to be brief in your answer, as brief as you can, with concrete recommendations. You're still muted.
Okay, that's good. It's better than I know.
Yeah.
Well, I think the answer is basically in the question itself, because I can understand how any solution can be preferred in the circumstances we're in at the moment, with such bad leadership, with such low quality leadership across the board, in the elite class. Looking at the legislative organ, the quality of people, that are manning legislation, and those running the executive. Well, I don't know much about those running the judiciary, but I just don't know how anyone expects a solution under the present circumstances. There has to be a very radical grassroots reaction, to things in the country. Because what suggestion are you going to make that is going to work out? My gentleman, who just tried to answer the last question, pointed out an accountant general making away with $80 billion or 80 billion naira, and very many others. And that was simply a tip of the iceberg, and it's a rot in the system that there is no recommendation you're going to make that will trigger anything positive in the society as it stands right now. Thank goodness we have, electoral cycles that, we have a choice to make, even though the choices do not count at the end of the day. You stay on queues under the burning sun for hours and ending, cast your vote, and at the end of the day, the counter of the vote is what matters, and not the votes that are counted. So what recommendation are you going to make that is going to work in the country? I'm at a loss on that.
All right, thank you very much. And I think I want to liaise your answer with one last question for Mr. Enefe, who spoke about voter registration. Do we not think then, if all of our recommendations are falling onto deaf ears, maybe we should, reclaim the power that we can have, which is actually depriving these people who aren't listening of a vote. And to do that, we need to have the right to vote. So, Mr. Enefe, could you maybe make a comment on, do you think that education can address the lack of multiculturalism in Nigeria? And do you actually think that voting rights will contribute to a greater impact of the diaspora at home?
Yes, I do believe that first and foremost, education would be a very viable route to gain more knowledge about the different cultural groups, the ethnic groups, and also the Nigerians in the diaspora and their family ties, which, like I said, often go further into different ethnic groups that are more home to Europe and Asia and South America, North America. But I do think that the giving voting rights would allow Nigerians in the diaspora to feel like they can contribute actively to the change that they want to see in Nigeria. I do believe that it will give a feeling of being able to change the direction that the country is going into. And like I said before, it already allowed actually for Nigerians in the diaspora to be voted for, to be elected as in local elections. So on the opposite side, it would be very logical for them to also be able to vote.
Thank you very much. So with this, it is my great regret to say that we have to come to a close on this particular topic, but I want to encourage our speakers to stay and contribute to the next session. I would also like to thank all of you for your comments and your recommendations. They are greatly appreciated. From what I've heard and from what we've heard, we urgently need to tackle brain drain. That's one thing. We need to tackle cultural tensions, and we need to become one and come together, as Mr. Nefe and Ms. Akintaylor has mentioned. We need to meet basic engagement of the diaspora to expand the basic right of representation and the right to vote. If we look at the size of diaspora remittance to Nigeria, we are about $19.2 billion in 2021. And yet Nigerians abroad who work hard to support their communities abroad and at home, as we've seen by the excellent panelists today and their passion to support Nigeria in its oneness, they have no way of contributing to the shaping of the political landscape. And when they try, what do you know? You haven't been home. So I hope that the contributions of the speakers have empowered you. We encourage everyone that is listening to put forth their recommendations. You can email us at admin@africafora.com if you have further recommendations, if you agree or if you disagree. We want to make sure that this conversation keeps going, but we also want to make sure that what we're saying doesn't just get lost and suspended into air. It needs to come to fruition. We need to do less talking and more doing. And then NIPR Integration Summit is giving us the occasion to do this. So please put your recommendations down and send them to us so that we can push for change, stop talking and more doing. With this, I have to bring to a close session 2 on the complexity of Nigerian identity and move on to our third and last session of the day, the Diaspora Dialogue, the road to economic recovery. For those of you who have joined us so far, don't move. We'll be back shortly, just a few seconds. And we'll be starting shortly with an equally excellent panel of speakers. Thank you so much for your patience and your contributions so far. Thank you again to all of our speakers today. This has been really, really rich. And I will be with you in just a few seconds.